The air in Atmore, Alabama, on the night of May 10, 2002, was thick and heavy, saturated with the humidity.
The clock struck midnight in Atmore, Alabama on May 10, 2002, inside the walls of Holman Correctional Facility. A 54-year-old woman named Lynda Lyon Block was about to make history. She would become the first woman executed in Alabama in 45 years. But that wasn't her only claim to fame. That night, Block was also about to become the last person in America executed by electric chair without having a choice. After her death, no one else would face Yellow Mama, Alabama's famous electric chair, unless they specifically asked for it. 9 years earlier, on October 4, 1993, Block had shot and killed Police Sergeant Roger Motley in a Walmart parking lot. The officer was simply doing his job, checking on a 9-year-old boy who seemed to be in trouble. Instead of cooperation, Motley was met with bullets. But here's what makes this story truly strange. Before becoming a cop killer, Lynda Block was known for helping others. She rescued abused animals as an investigator for the Humane Society. She volunteered at libraries and worked on political campaigns. People saw her as someone who cared about making the world better. So, how did an animal lover become a cold-blooded killer? How did a woman who spent her life helping the helpless end up shooting a police officer who was trying to help a child? Block and her partner George Sibley belonged to a strange group called Sovereign Citizens. They believed the American government had no power over them. They destroyed their driver's licenses, birth certificates, and social security cards. They claimed they weren't even American citizens anymore, as Block sat strapped in that electric chair. One question remained unanswered. Was she a dangerous extremist who got what she deserved? Or was she a woman pushed too far by a system she no longer trusted? The truth might shock you. Before we begin, please like this video, share it, and subscribe, because this isn't the kind of video you see every time. Remember, this is the final sentence. Stay with us. Lynda Cheryl Lyon was born on February 8, 1948 in Orlando, Florida. Her parents were Francis Frank Lyon and Beryl Lynn Owen. From the start, life wasn't kind to Lynda. When she was just 10 years old, tragedy struck. Her father, Frank, died suddenly from heart failure. Losing a parent at such a young age left deep scars on Lynda's heart, but her pain was far from over. Her mother, Beryl Lynn, was not a loving parent. According to Lynda, her mother was both physically and mentally abusive. The two were never close. Growing up in a house without love or safety shaped Lynda into someone who would always be searching for something better. Lynda did have one bright spot in her dark childhood. Her younger sister Denise, born in 1952. The two girls stuck together in their broken home. But even that bond couldn't fix the damage being done. When Lynda grew up, she made a shocking choice. She married an 8-year-old man named Carl Block. Carl was a military veteran who had lost his own son in a car crash. Some people thought Lynda was looking for the father figure she had lost when she was 10. The marriage didn't last long. They divorced in December 1991. After her divorce, Lynda moved to Key West, Florida. This is where people saw a completely different side of her. She became known for helping others, especially animals that couldn't help themselves. Lynda worked as secretary of the Humane Society. She also became an animal abuse investigator, tracking down people who hurt defenseless creatures. Her second husband, George Sibley, later said that helping others was just part of who Lynda was. But Lynda didn't stop with animals. She threw herself into community work. She served as president of the Friends of the Library for 2 whole years. She even worked as a publicity director for someone running for mayor. During this time, Lynda started getting interested in politics. She began publishing a political magazine called Liberatus. Through this work, she started developing strong anti-government views. In 1992, Lynda met George Sibley. He shared her growing hatred of the government. They became partners in life and in their extreme beliefs. But their anti-government views soon turned violent. In August 1992, Lynda and George broke into her ex-husband Carl's apartment. They tied him to a chair, gagged him, and demanded he stop trying to claim their house. Then, Lynda stabbed the elderly man in the chest. This attack changed everything. Now they were criminals on the run. Roger Motley was the kind of police officer every community needs. He worked for the Opelika Police Department in Alabama and took his job seriously. Roger wasn't just collecting a paycheck. He truly cared about protecting people. At home, Roger was a loving husband to his wife, Juanita. His fellow officers respected him as someone they could count on. He was the type of man who would give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. On October 4, 1993, Roger was just doing what he always did, looking out for others. A concerned citizen had called about a child who seemed to be in trouble. The caller thought a 9-year-old boy might need help. Roger responded because that's what good cops do. He had no idea he was walking into a death trap. Carl Block was 80 years old and had already lived through more pain than most people. He was a military veteran who had served his country with honor. But life had been cruel to Carl. He had lost his own son in a terrible car crash. When Carl married Lynda, he probably thought he was getting a companion for his golden years. Instead, he got a nightmare. In August 1992, his ex-wife Lynda and her boyfriend George broke into his apartment. They tied him up, gagged him, and terrorized him over a house dispute. Then, Lynda stabbed the elderly man in the chest and left him to die. Neighbors found Carl and saved his life. Carl pressed charges which forced Lynda and George to run. His decision to seek justice would eventually lead to a police officer's death. By October 1993, Lynda Block and George Sibley were living like hunted animals. They had failed to show up for their sentencing hearing in Florida after attacking Carl Block. Now they were fugitives running from the law. The couple was camping in their car in a Walmart parking lot in Opelika, Alabama. With them was Lynda's 9-year-old son. Imagine being a child and having to live in a car because your mother and her boyfriend were criminals on the run. A passerby noticed something wasn't right. The child looked distressed, like he needed help. The concerned citizen thought the family might be homeless and living in their vehicle. They called the police because they were worried about the boy's safety. Sergeant Roger Motley got the call. He was told to check on a possible child welfare situation at the Walmart. Roger had no idea he was about to face 2 armed anti-government extremists who believed they were above the law. When Sergeant Motley arrived at the Walmart parking lot, he found Sibley's car parked behind the store. He approached the vehicle and asked George Sibley for his driver's license. It seemed like a routine request, but George Sibley wasn't a normal person. He started explaining his crazy theory that he didn't need a driver's license. Sibley believed the government had no authority over him. He thought he could drive without following the same rules as everyone else. As Sibley rambled about his anti-government beliefs, Sergeant Motley became concerned. The situation was getting tense. Motley moved his hand toward his weapon, probably sensing danger. That's when everything went wrong. George Sibley suddenly pulled out a gun and started shooting at the police officer. Sergeant Motley fired back, hitting Sibley and wounding him. Motley then took cover behind his patrol car as bullets flew through the air. While the gunfight was happening, Lynda Block was at a payphone nearby. When she heard the shots, she knew her partner was in trouble. Instead of running away or trying to calm things down, Lynda made a deadly choice. She pulled out her own gun and ran toward the fight. Witnesses later said they saw her drop into a crouched shooting position like she had been trained for combat. As Sergeant Motley turned to face this new threat, Lynda Block opened fire. Her bullet hit him in the chest. The officer had given his bulletproof vest to another officer that day, a decision that would cost him his life. Motley fell to the ground, mortally wounded. Instead of helping the dying officer or calling for an ambulance, Lynda and George fled the scene. They left Sergeant Roger Motley bleeding in a Walmart parking lot. A good man who was just trying to help a child was now dying because two criminals thought they were above the law. After the shooting, police quickly caught Lynda Block and George Sibley. Both were charged with capital murder, the most serious crime in Alabama. If convicted, they could face the death penalty. But from the moment they were arrested, Block and Sibley refused to cooperate. The court appointed lawyers to defend them, but the couple wouldn't work with their own attorneys. They had their own twisted ideas about how the law worked. Block and Sibley claimed that Alabama had no right to put them on trial. They argued that the state government was fake and had no power over them. Their reasoning was completely crazy. They said Alabama was never properly let back into the United States after the Civil War, ended in 1865. Think about how ridiculous this sounds. They were saying that for over 100 years, Alabama wasn't really part of America. According to their logic, Alabama courts couldn't try them because Alabama wasn't even a real state. The couple also claimed they shot Sergeant Motley in self-defense. They said they were protecting themselves from government tyranny. In their minds, a police officer asking for a driver's license was the same as a government attack on their freedom. Block and Sibley weren't just making up these crazy ideas on their own. They were part of a movement called sovereign citizens. These people believe the American government is illegal and has no authority over them. To prove their point, Block and Sibley had destroyed their birth certificates, driver's licenses, and social security cards. They claimed they weren't American citizens anymore. They thought this would somehow protect them from American laws. This sovereign citizen movement attracts people who are angry at the government. They reject the Constitution and believe federal and state governments are fake. Some of them, like Block and Sibley, are willing to use violence to defend their beliefs. During the trial, prosecutors couldn't prove exactly who fired the shot that killed Sergeant Motley. Both Block and Sibley had guns, and both had shot at the officer, but it didn't matter to the jury. Both defendants were found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to death. The judge and jury didn't care about their anti-government theories. They didn't care that Block and Sibley thought Alabama wasn't a real state. The legal reality was simple. They had killed a police officer, and they would pay the ultimate price. Their crazy beliefs couldn't save them from justice. On December 21, 1994, Lynda Block entered Alabama's death row. She was given the institutional serial number Z575 and sent to Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women in Wetumpka, Alabama. Death row for women was different from the men's section. There were fewer female inmates, but the conditions were just as harsh. Block was held in maximum security, spending most of her time alone in a small cell. For over 7 years, Block lived knowing that someday the state would kill her. But even facing death, she never gave up her anti-government beliefs. She continued to claim that Alabama had no right to hold her or execute her. Other inmates probably thought she was crazy. Here was a woman who could have spent her time trying to make peace with what she had done. Instead, he kept insisting that the government was fake and that she was innocent. Block watched as other death row inmates came and went. Some got their sentences reduced, others were executed. But Block remained stubborn, refusing to admit she had done anything wrong. As her execution date approached, most death row inmates would hire the best lawyers they could find. They would file appeal after appeal, trying anything to save their lives. But Lynda Block was different. She chose to represent herself in her final appeals. This was like performing surgery on yourself. Technically possible, but almost certainly a disaster. Block had no legal training and no understanding of how the appeals process really worked. Block wrote a 2-page handwritten letter to Alabama Governor Don Siegelman asking for clemency. In her letter, she requested that the governor appoint a 7-member panel to review her case. She claimed that she and George Sibley had been prosecuted unfairly. Governor Siegelman read her request and rejected it. He found no mitigating circumstances that would justify sparing her life. He also found no problems with the evidence that had convicted her. Then something shocking happened. George Sibley, the man who claimed to love Block, betrayed her. He filed his own petition with the Alabama Supreme Court claiming that Block, not him, had fired the shot that killed Sergeant Motley. Sibley was trying to save his own life by throwing his partner under the bus. After years of standing together against the government, he was now willing to let Block die alone. All of Block's appeals were rejected. The courts had heard enough of her sovereign citizen theories. Her execution was scheduled for May 10, 2002. Block had run out of time. And she had run out of options. On her last day alive, Lynda Block was moved from Julia Tutwiler Prison to Holman Correctional Facility near Atmore. This was where Alabama carried out its executions. After more than 7 years on death row, Block was finally leaving the place that had been her home. The other female inmates watched as she was taken away. Some probably felt sad. Others might have been relieved. Block had spent over 7 years with these women, but now she was walking toward her death. 3 close friends came to visit Block for several hours on her final day. These were people who still cared about her even after everything she had done. They spent precious time talking, maybe sharing memories of better days. Block also met with a spiritual advisor. Many people facing execution try to make peace with God in their final hours. The advisor was there to help her prepare for whatever comes after death. Prison officials offered Block a last meal, tradition that lets condemned prisoners choose whatever they want to eat before they die. But Block refused. She didn't want anything special. Maybe she had lost her appetite. Or maybe this was just another way of showing defiance. Block also refused to make a final statement. Most people facing execution use their last words to apologize to victims' families, or to say goodbye to loved ones, or to proclaim their innocence. But Block stayed silent. Even at the end, she wouldn't give the system the satisfaction of hearing her speak. At midnight on May 10, 2002, Lynda Block was strapped into Alabama's electric chair. This chair had a nickname, Yellow Mama, and it had killed many people over the years. But Block would be its last victim without a choice. At exactly 12:01 a.m., prison officials threw the switch. Electricity coursed through Block's body as she sat strapped in the wooden chair. The current was designed to stop her heart and end her life quickly. Alabama Department of Corrections Commissioner Mike Haley watched the execution. Later, he said that Block never showed any emotion, even at the very end. Her stare was completely blank, like she wasn't even there. Sergeant Motley's widow, Juanita, had planned to watch her husband's killer die. But when prison officials put the hood over Block's head, Juanita couldn't handle it. She asked an officer to take her out of the witness room. At 12:10 a.m., doctors pronounced Lynda Block dead. She had been electrocuted for exactly 9 minutes. Block became the last person in America executed by electric chair without having the option to choose lethal injection instead. Lynda Block's execution made history in several ways. She was the first woman executed in Alabama since 1957, a gap of 45 years. Most people had never seen a woman put to death by their state. Her execution was also significant because of the method. After July 1, 2002, Alabama would switch to lethal injection as its main way of executing people. Prisoners would still be able to choose the electric chair, but it wouldn't be forced on them. Block was the last person to die in Yellow Mama without having a choice. 3 years later, on August 4, 2005, George Sibley followed his partner to the grave. But unlike Block, Sibley was executed by lethal injection. The man who had betrayed Block in his final appeals didn't get to choose his method of death either. Block's execution left behind a tragic victim, her own son. The 9-year-old boy who had been in that Walmart parking lot was now a teenager who had watched his mother become a killer and then get executed by the state. Imagine growing up with that burden. The Opelika Police Department never forgot Sergeant Roger Motley. They honored his sacrifice and remembered him as a hero who died trying to protect a child. His name was added to memorials for fallen officers. Block's case showed how dangerous the sovereign citizen movement could be. These people weren't just harmless conspiracy theorists. They were willing to kill police officers to defend their twisted beliefs. Strangely, Block's execution got much less media attention than similar cases involving men. Maybe people weren't as interested in female killers. Or maybe the story was too complicated for most news outlets to explain properly. There was a terrible irony in Block's story. Sergeant Motley died trying to protect her son, but his death led to that same child losing his mother to the electric chair. The officer's attempt to help a child ended up making that child an orphan. Block's execution marked the end of an era in Alabama. Yellow Mama had been the state's primary execution method for decades. But now it would mostly sit unused. The case also proved that when it comes to killing police officers, gender doesn't matter. Male or female, cop killers face the ultimate punishment. Looking back at Lynda Block's life and death, we're left with difficult questions that don't have easy answers. Was Block a principled woman fighting against government tyranny? Or was she just a dangerous extremist who used politics to justify murder? The truth probably lies somewhere in between. But it's hard to have sympathy for someone who shot a police officer trying to help a child. The most tragic irony of Block's story is how it contradicts itself. Here was a woman who spent years investigating animal abuse and protecting creatures that couldn't protect themselves. She worked for libraries and helped political campaigns. People saw her as someone who cared about making the world better. If this story made you think about the complex questions of justice, redemption, and second chances, please like this video. Subscribe for more true crime cases that explore the darkest corners of human nature. And share it with someone who enjoys thought-provoking stories.